6 months.
Right.
Okay, here we go. I'll figure it out.
Some of our volunteers on the thing. I can reach out to Mary Jo. She's at Team.
Yeah, because I had a date with someone yesterday at 4.
I don't know that name, but we'll get the contact info and start reaching out to people.
Yeah, I know.
Sounds good.
Yeah, okay, not because I said it, but I can't do anything right after this. So can you meet sometime later today?
Are these yours?
Make it see better. Okay. Yeah, I don't know what's in your complaint, so. I'm gonna wait till you talk to me. I'll look at my calendar when I'm done, okay? That's okay, but you should check because I replied to you. So it's just like I created my.
That's why I was invited.
You know, if there's a funeral or something like that. Thank you.
Right.
I got it.
Okay.
Yep.
You're just hiding it.
Got some shirts?
Oh, man.
Oh, I like them. Yeah, I like the color. I like the. What's that called?
Yeah, right up.
The old Wells Fargo, right? That's all.
We're gonna call the meeting to order. It's 8:02. Roll call. Got it. Is there approval to, or motion to approve the July 26th agenda? So moved. Second. It's been moved and supported. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Okay, so we, do you want to introduce our guests?
Yeah, so we have Alan Higgins with us today from the State Historic Preservation Office. And Alan is here today to give us some information about the Certified Local Government Program and just kind of the role of historic preservation in our downtown. So Alan, looking forward to you.
All right, thank you, Jim. So Jim said I'm Alan. So I'm going to talk quickly today about the Certified Local Government Program, or what we call the CLG program, with the State Historic Preservation Office. Just want to kind of hit some of the high points about what it's about, some of the benefits. There's a lot of nuance in there, but I want to keep it to about 10 to 15 minutes for you guys this morning. And then I will stick around for the rest of the meeting, so if you guys do have questions or anything, I'm happy to talk through things later on. So just kind of quickly, if you're not familiar with the State Historic Preservation Office, or SHPO, as you may hear us refer to, we are part of the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, so we work alongside the team at Main Street, development ready communities, and all that good stuff as well. We do a lot of different things in our office. We coordinate the state and federal historic preservation tax credit programs. So maybe you or people you know have worked through those programs to access tax credits for work on historic residential buildings or historic commercial buildings. We also do things like environmental review for historic properties. Lots of different things. My side of the table is working with grants in our office and also working with local communities on the historic preservation programming. So that's what I do all day, every day, all year long, is get out to local communities and help them figure out where historic preservation fits into some of the things that they're trying to do. Today we're going to talk about the CLG program specifically. It's not a very descriptive name as to what a certified local government actually is. It's a federal program, so I will blame that on the lack of description that goes along with a generic name like that. Basically what it is, though, is it's a partnership. It's kind of, if you are familiar with the Redevelopment Ready Communities program, which is a development-focused program, the CLG program is kind of the preservation version of that, if you will. It's set up to make communities more ready to incorporate historic preservation into their community planning and economic development. That's really what it's about. It's not there to come in and tell you what you have to do as it relates to your goals and things like that, but it does put a framework in place that communities all across the country use to, again, kind of bolster what they're doing as it relates to preservation. It is a federal program. This is from the National Park Service, and the program trickles down to state historic preservation offices like us in every state, and then we partner with local communities on the ground to implement that program. And so that's why we talk about things as a federal, state, local partnership when we talk about the CLG program. Just for frame of reference, there are about 2,200 communities across the country that currently participate in the program. It's been in place since 1983. And in every community across the country that participates in the program, they meet the same basic requirements for entry into the program. We'll talk a little bit about that later. But I do want to provide that context that it is this broader framework that's kind of been tested all across the country in communities of different sizes and resources and capacity. And here's what that partnership looks like functionally. I'm not going to talk about all of this in detail because again, talking through things kind of quickly this morning. But again, just to kind of put it to paper what that federal, state, local partnership looks like. So the CLG program, again, as a Park Service program here on my left, Park Service puts in place the guidelines and parameters for the program. They also provide funding through what we call the Historic Preservation Fund, which is a national fund that is dedicated to providing funding for historic preservation activities across the country. That is not taxpayer money, it's actually federal government revenue from offshore oil and gas leases. They're taking money from one non-renewable resource and putting it into other non-renewable resources in the forms of our historic buildings. So they set the parameters, they provide funding, that then gets passed down to our Office of the State, where we again do the day-to-day work in helping out our communities, rather providing technical assistance, providing training. We pass along grant funding opportunities to our communities. And then the local units of government, those that participate in the CLG program, are the ones that are actually implementing the program benefits, the technical assistance, the funding as it relates to goals that they have. So again, that nice kind of trickle down aspect of the program. What I always like to tell people, and you mentioned this earlier, is it's about the local community at the end of the day. You know, it's designed to be reflexive to the individual needs of the community. Again, there's the broader kind of national framework that every community participates in. But at the end of the day, it's not about us coming in and saying, hey, here's what you need to do with the places in your community. It's your community. You guys are the experts. They're your resources. You guys are the stewards of them and the people that you work with. So we're there to provide support. You know, again, we're not here to come in and tell you what you absolutely have to do with these things. We want to talk to you about your goals, where they fit in with the other things that you're trying to do. And then we want to figure out how our technical assistance and our funding can help you get to where you want to be. So it's really kind of that approach from the local government, local community, upward to SHPO as we work with the community. Just for reference, in case you aren't familiar, maybe some of you have never heard of the CLG program, which is not uncommon. We currently do have 41 communities in the state of Michigan that participate in this program. And that includes 7 other communities that participate in the Michigan Main Street program. And we've got another 2 to 4 in various stages of applying to this program. Coldwater actually just finished their application process and will be coming on board soon. And so we have a nice spread of communities all across the state that participate in this. And again, speaking to that last point, that this is really designed to be responsive and reflexive to the needs of every community. We've got communities ranging from the city of Detroit to the village of Calumet that participate in this program. So communities of every size, capacity, resources. That again, preservation may not be the main focus of what they're trying to do in their communities, but they realize there's value in there, and so they've accessed the CLG program to again get access to those technical assistance opportunities, those grant funding opportunities that help them figure out how they can get to where they want to be. So I really like that about the program is, it can be scaled to meet you guys where you are, whether you are just starting to figure out where preservation fits in, or you've been dabbling in preservation, or, some communities have been doing preservation for 30 years. Some of these communities want everything that we can offer. They want our education, they want our training, they want our technical assistance. And then there's some communities that are just like, hey, we've got this figured out, we just want your grant funding. And that's fine too. Again, it's meant to be responsive to where a community is as it relates to historic preservation.
Is the grant go to the DDA or
Yeah. We'll talk about that in just a second. So I'm not going to talk through all the benefits of the CLG program, but I did want to highlight just a couple. Grant funding will be one of them. I will share, I may have before, but I'll share some additional information with Jim, as well as a copy of this PowerPoint presentation that can be dispersed amongst the group as it relates to kind of the full slate of benefits that go along with the program and some other helpful information. But again, just want to highlight a couple of things for your all's benefit this morning. So the first thing I just want to touch on quickly is again, going to that partnership aspect. If you're a CLG community, you get specialized support from our office. So we're a state agency, we help everybody that comes to us, broadly speaking. But for those communities that have joined the CLG program, that have taken that extra step to say, hey, we really value what historic preservation can do for our community, the role that it plays in economic development and community development, we provide specialized support because we want to be particularly responsive to their needs as they come up, whether it's just, hey, can you guys come out and talk with us about this project? Can an architect look at this particular building for us? Can you come out and do some training for our community? So we try to do that in a more direct way with our communities that participate in this program. Again, just put a couple of examples up here. One of those is survey planning. So if communities are going out trying to figure out what their historic assets are in their communities and how best to protect them, we can go out on the ground with communities and help them figure out, do walkthroughs, drive-throughs, talk with property owners, all that sort of stuff is fair game as our technical assistance. We'll also do building consultation. Our office does have several historical architects. And sometimes communities have those problem properties that they just don't know what the heck to do with. And they need some outsider perspective on maybe how to approach those buildings or funding opportunities that may be available to assist those properties. And our architects can come out and help with that sort of thing. And then archaeological advice, kind of the same thing. If you should be in a situation, nobody wants to unexpectedly identify archaeological resources. But if you ever, if the community ever does have a need for archaeological advice, we do have in-house archaeologists that can come out and help figure out what to do with those resources, who to contact, and all that good stuff. Training and education is also a big part of the CLG program. Again, every community is a little bit different in terms of where they are with figuring out historic preservation. As with everything in life, no community does historic preservation perfectly. There are always things to learn. And so we try to facilitate that to the extent that we can, whether that is us coming out and doing training for groups in the community or for the public overall, or it's us partnering with other organizations at the state and national level to bring in experts from all across the country to talk about particular needs in a community. We do that sort of thing on a regular basis. We also have a slew of materials that we make available to our CLG communities, technical handouts, brochures, all that fun stuff. Sometimes you just need those talking pieces for people that may not be well versed in preservation, and so we have a lot of easy to digest materials that we make available for everybody that may have a desire to figure this out. Because again, we don't want to just come in and quote unquote fix a problem or help fix a problem. We want to build capacity at the end of the day. We want the community to have a better understanding over time, so that as they look to their goals 3, 4, 5 years from now, as to where they would be, we're helping in that process. We're training, we're building up that educational awareness, we're bringing up that capacity for people to do things on their own as they continue to figure out historic preservation. So that's really a big part of this program as well. And just again, we partner with a lot of organizations, whether National Park Service in particular. Again, this is their program, but they also often provide scholarships to different things like Main Street conferences. The National Alliance of Preservation Commissions is a national organization that is specifically dedicated to local historic preservation issues all across the country. And they have conferences every 2 years. They also have a lot of virtual trainings and things like that. We partner with them on special training for Michigan communities at least once a year. So there are a lot of different opportunities, again, that we try to make available to our communities. And we try to particularly capitalize on those ones that are free or low cost, either directly or through scholarship opportunities, because we know that, not everybody has the means to get training at all times, whether they are just, part of the public, whether they sit on board, whether it's city staff. So we, again, really want to provide those opportunities. The big piece, the grant program. So in the state of Michigan, for historic preservation funding through our office, this is the only way to access grant funding from our office. We do not have grant funding that is available just for the general public or any community that may come to us. You have to be part of the CLG program if you want to access community-based preservation funding from our office. So currently, again, those 41 communities that we currently have in the program, they are the only ones that can access our CLG grant funding. That's not to say that all 41 of those always apply for funding. We typically, of course varies every year, but, maybe see 5 to 10 applications a year for grant funding. So it's a pretty limited pool of applicants at the end of the day. You're not only not competing with everybody across the state, you're not even competing with all those CLGs at the end of the day, because most of them, they don't all have a project every year that they want to come in for. So just kind of quickly, the way that our grant funding works is, again, our money comes from Park Service, the Historic Preservation Fund, which I mentioned earlier. We then pass that money out to the local communities through an annual grant funding round. We have that call for applications typically in the fall of every year. So just for reference, our last funding round opened on October 1st of last year, and then it closed on February 1st. So there's always, at least 3 months, typically about a 4-month period for applications to come in. This year's grant cycle will probably follow that same sort of line. Any community that is in the CLG program before the application due date can apply for that funding round. So, should you guys say, hey, this is great and we want to fast track trying to get into this program, if you were in the program before the February 1st deadline, you could apply for our next round of funding. We typically select 3 to 7 projects a year, just depending on our funding, the scale of the projects that come in and so on. And then we have 2 main buckets of projects. So we fund what we call planning, documentation, and education projects. And those are those kind of what we consider bread and butter preservation activities. So funding for communities to do things like historic resource surveys, to do things like National Register nominations, which open up the possibility for property owners to take advantage of tax credits. We can do design guidelines through those things. We can do training and education. We can do workshops. We can do hands-on training for property owners on how to repair masonry or windows, all that good stuff. And I'll throw up a slide with examples here in a second. And then the second category is our rehab planning and rehab projects. And that's when we're talking about work on a specific property in a community. Whether it is pre-development work, such as a condition assessment, plans and specs, or so on, or we're talking about physical work, repair, foundation repair, and all that good stuff. Our grants, as you can see here, pretty low threshold for accessing them. $2,500 on the planning side, $5,000 on the rehab side, and then they do cap out at $100,000 per application. Most of our grants tend to fall toward the $50,000 or less range, but we do have that cap of $100,000 for those projects that are particularly impactful or complex that need that additional funding. We also know that for rehab projects specifically, especially right now, $100,000 may not go very far. So we will also fund successive phases of projects over time too. And then that's pretty common. So, if there was a property that needed rehab dollars, you could come in 1 year for masonry work, come back the next for windows, roof, all that good stuff. And the last one, this match requirements do vary from year to year. Last 5 years, we have had no match requirement on our grants. And that's for both the planning side and the rehab side, which is pretty unusual for grant funding. I can't promise it will always stay that way. I hope it always stays that way. That's a decision that comes above me. But we do recognize the benefit of having that no match for our grants, because sometimes it can be hard to come up with that. Of course, the community can still decide to show that if they would like to. So as to your question a few minutes ago, so the way our program works is applications must come in from the certified local government. So that is the local unit of government that participates in the program. And that can be any entity within the local unit of government that could apply for that. So the DDA could apply through the city for that. They could also partner with a nonprofit or public entity on a project. And that does not mean that it has to be a preservation-specific nonprofit or public entity. It could be a historical society. For example, it could be like an arts council. It could be, we've had CLGs partner with Red Cross before, or school districts or universities. So any nonprofit or public entity can partner with a CLG to access this funding. There are a couple of particulars that come into play when we are talking about the rehab projects. So again, that physical work, similar to work. And this is a federal requirement, not our requirement. So when we're talking about physical work on a property, the building does have to be owned by either the municipality, a nonprofit, or a public entity. So when we're talking about rehab, we unfortunately cannot fund private work through this program. Federal government won't let us do that. We can facilitate work on private property. So, for example, some communities have used our grant funding to hire an architect to support local facade improvement programs, to do all the plans and specs associated with them, provide construction administration and things like that. So we can assist in that sort of way, but we could not have a private property owner come to us through this specific grant program and say, hey, I need foundation work on my property. That I wouldn't qualify. There's some nuances again in the way we can sometimes work through that, depending on the case, but I do like to make sure that that is known. The other main thing is that it must be listed in the National Register of Historic Places. That's either individually or as part of a historic district. If it's not already listed in the National Register, we can, again, pay for that sort of thing through grant funds as well. So we can pay to have properties listed in the National Register. And when you're talking about that planning side, that of course can encompass private properties and often does. So, doing National Register of Historic Districts is the common use of our grant funds. Doing design guidelines that encompass historic or private properties, all those sorts of things are fair game. And our funds can be stacked with other funds. They're federal funds at the end of the day, but a common thing is people use them in association with Arts Council grants. They also have a $100,000 cap on their capital improvement grants. And so nonprofits sometimes will stack our funds to the municipality with funds that they're also accessing through Arts Council organizations. Talk about the grant timeline for the application process, and then projects usually have about 2 years or so to complete. I'm not going to talk through all these, but again, just for the benefit, and particularly for when you guys have the slide deck later on, just wanted to throw some examples of projects that we have funded over time through CLG grants. This is just some kind of broad categorization. We do have on our website, and I will also forward the link to this, a list of grants that we have funded over the last 15, 20 years, in case you're curious what some other communities have used the funding for specifically. So I will send the list of that along as well. What I do like to tell people though is that, again, because this is supposed to be a responsive program to what you guys are dealing with, we want to talk to you about your projects. Assuming you guys come into the program, you're looking at a grant, we want to help you have a good project. We want good projects. We want to give away our money. So some granting agencies will not help you along the way with your grant applications. We will. We obviously can't write them for you because we are the ones that are reviewing them at the end of the day. But we will do as much as we can short of writing the grant application for you, so we can help you develop a scope of work for your project. We will do preliminary review of your grant applications before we officially submit them to us, and so on. Because again, we want to help you guys figure out how you can access and use the benefits that we have for the goals. And again, just another example of what some communities have done, but I just want to have this in the slide deck for when you guys receive it later on. The other thing just quickly want to mention is that CLG participation does trigger access to other grant programs as well. So again, this is a federal program. The National Park Service themselves do have about a dozen to 15 or so different grant programs that they administer directly. And some of those are open to all local units of government or nonprofits. Some of those do specifically require that a community participate in the CLG program to access those. So I'm not going to talk about these in a lot of detail. One I did want to just mention quickly, though, is this Auburn Historic Revitalization Program, which is accessible only to local governments that participate in the CLG program. But that program specifically is geared toward downtown development of small rural communities. And the way that they define that is communities with populations of 50,000 or less. That fund provides up to $750,000 that a local community can then use to sub-grant out to private property owners for work on their buildings. So that is a good program that I just wanted to mention, and that is triggered by participation in the CLG program. Some of you may have seen we had a Lakeshore heritage program through our office that we advertised about a year or so ago, but that came through that revitalization program. So we ourselves have worked through a lot of these programs as well. Okay, so how do you become a CLG? So again, every community that participates in the program must meet the same requirements. Doesn't matter if they're in Wyoming or if they're in Michigan. So there are 5 things we're looking at. The first 2 are really what's critical here, and that is that a community needs to have a local historic district ordinance. What that means is they have to have the ordinance on the books that gives them the ability, should they decide to use it, to establish local historic districts. That does not mean that a community has to or is suddenly going to go out and establish a bunch of local historic districts. We have some communities that have the ordinance on the books, but they've never used it because they're just not in a place that they feel it's the right time to do that. But the key is that you have that power should you decide to exercise it. And just for frame of reference, in case anybody isn't familiar, so we've talked about national register districts, we've talked about now local historic districts. The difference between those are that a local historic district is designated by the local unit of government, and there is design review power that is assigned to the local unit of government as part of that process for any resources within that. A national register district, which we talked about briefly earlier, does not have any sort of regulatory review associated with it. It's an honorary thing at the end of the day that just provides access to things like tax credits. So again, having that local historic district ordinance that gives the power to the community to establish local historic districts is what we're after. You have it as a tool should you decide to use it, but it doesn't mean that you necessarily ever have to use it. Alongside that is the establishment of the Historic District Commission. That is the entity that, if there were a local historic district established in the community, they would be the unit responsible for administering that design review process. They also can do a lot of other things, particularly for communities that don't have a local historic district already established. They can do public education, outreach. They can come in and support great programs and all that sort of thing as well. But their main function, should they be in those communities, is to serve those districts. So those 2 pieces, those are key to becoming a CLG. Once those 2 things are on the book, a community can apply to be a CLG. That's all we're after. Having that ordinance, having a historic district commission appointed. These other things, really, number 3, it seems scarier than it is, because people see that and think, oh my God, we've got to go out and survey every historic building we have in town. Really, what we mean here is we just want the community to have an idea of what's important to them. That's what it's about. It doesn't mean that you have to go out and identify everything, but let's put to paper some basic idea of, hey, here are the areas in our community, here are the 30 properties, whatever it may be, that are really important to us and we want to figure out how to protect and invest in over time. 4 really just means that the community is following OMA, FOIA, all those good things that they should be doing already. And then the 5th thing is really that they just meet the requirements under the program on a continuing basis to continue to be eligible for the program over the long haul. So there's no, a community can participate in this program indefinitely. There's no phase out to it. Once you're in this, as long as you continue to have that local historic district ordinance and your historic district commission, unless you decide you just don't want to do it anymore. People always ask, what is the administrative burden of this program? So it's a free program. There's no cost involved with it. The only administrative requirement is that every year our communities do provide a brief annual report to us on their historic preservation activities. And really that is, what were your goals for the previous year? Did you meet them? And what are your goals next year? Did you guys provide any local funding assistance for historic preservation activities? Did you guys do any educational activities? Really, it's just a mechanism for us to see what you are up to in the local community, and also for us to coordinate that information with other communities we see across the state so that we see what those broader trends are, because it helps us focus our technical assistance and our grant funding activities in different ways depending on what their prevailing needs are at any given time. So kind of talk through this, again, historic district ordinance, historic district commission, need to be on the books, that a community can apply. People always ask when can we apply, how long it takes. You can apply at any time. There's no deadline for putting in an application to become a CLG. We accept applications year round. When I say the process takes 2 to 3 months, part of that depends on if the community already has their local historic district on ordinance on books. If not, of course, there's time involved in that, public hearings, all that good stuff that happens at the local level. But once they come to the point of applying for the program, we move that through things pretty quickly. Sometimes it happens in as little as 30 days. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer if we need to talk about things, but it can happen pretty. That's my contact information. That was a lot of stuff I threw out very quickly, not quite as quickly as I promised I would get this done in. Sorry, Jim, to throw off your old meeting agenda. Again, I'll share this slide deck. I'll share some additional information, and I am going to stick around today, but I'm more than happy to talk about anything later on, or anybody's free to email, call, or if you guys do want to explore this more, I'm always happy to come back out and we can talk more.
Thank you, Alan. So obviously, if you look at our agenda, we're actually going to discuss this issue later on the agenda as a board. But are there any specific questions you want to ask Alan at this point? I don't know if you want to wait, Alan, until we get to that point, and then we ask the questions at that time.
Absolutely, I'll hang out.
All right, thanks. Right, is there anybody here that would like to address the board from the public? Seeing none, moving on to the consent agenda, is there a motion to approve?
I move we approve the minutes from the June 28th meeting.
And the treasurer's report?
And the treasurer's report.
Sorry, I have a question. You said are people here, like, are people allowed to come to these meetings? Because I've had people ask me, but I thought that they
Oh,
had
it's
to
a
go
public
to like
meeting.
a city nighttime.
Yes.
So I just keep telling people no, but I'll let them know. Like, I just didn't know that. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So there's been a motion, is there support? Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Motion carries. Executive committee, so while we did already complete the evaluation process and reviewed that, we now, actually we're a bit late. Jim's contract actually was up on July 1st. It does renew, obviously, on a 12-month cycle until we do something, but we need to meet as an executive committee. So all the executive committee is here today. If I could just throw out quickly here the dates that I'm available to see whether you guys are available. I'd like to do it next week if possible. I know it's the summer. But,
Tuesdays and Thursdays are bad for me.
okay, do you have Monday at noon? Could you do Monday at noon?
I could do Monday at noon.
Tim, could you do Monday at noon?
let's see.
That would be the 30th.
31st?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Megan, could you do Monday at noon?
Yeah.
Okay,
Where at?
At your office.
let's just do it at our office, our office.
It's ours now.
Yeah, my office. So Monday, July 31st at noon, we're meeting to discuss this contract. All right. Nothing else under executive committee, committee reports. I did, before we talk about reports or committees, I did hand out, I think Tom, you came in a little bit late, but there's a sheet up here if you want to come and get it. It basically has it's current as of like last week. I know that I'm still working with Mindy and Megan about the committees they want to be on.
I think, so I went to events committee. Am I on that? I
I
was
don't
invited,
know.
so I went.
I invited you because I
Okay.
mentioned
And wait,
Oh, it
I
doesn't
know,
look
I
like
was
she's
on
on
the
the-
event committee too, and I didn't get an invite, but I'm only on the outreach on this. But I thought I was on the outreach and the event.
Okay, so you want to be on the events committee as well.
I don't, that's the main one I feel like I'd rather be on if I was only be on one, but I'm willing to be on both, but I thought I was on both, but then I wasn't told about the events meeting. So I missed it.
Okay. Who's the chair of that events? Because I thought at one point,
It was supposed to be me, but I'm not. I am or I'm not, I don't.
So I had a lot of committee members ask, which is why I scheduled one, and it was right before Porch Fest and a lot of other events, so I just wanted to bring them up to speed. Yeah, currently, Tim, you're the chair of that committee. You were at the last meeting.
Mhm.
We had.
Okay. So I did not put that down because I wasn't sure exactly. At one point, I think that's when Mike was on this chair, and then Mike stepped down, so I wanted to make sure that Tim was okay with that, because you're the chair of business development as well, so, okay, so I can modify that. I've added Elizabeth to the events committee as well. And Megan and Mindy, both, Megan and I are gonna connect tomorrow. But Mindy and I have met, and because of her schedule, she was waiting to actually find out when the business development committee was meeting. We've met once. So is there gonna be a regular, scheduled meeting of the month? Because that would be important for her to know, for her to say, I can be a part of that committee. So I know we met, did we meet the Wednesday at 8:00? I don't know what.
Something like that.
Yeah, are we gonna do like the first Wednesday, like when we used to do it over at Dan Gerlach's?
Well, that would be something the committee has to figure out. With our, I gave away my copies.
Oh.
With our goals and our priorities for that, and we have those to discuss and look at when we're looking at the sheet we put together from our retreat. We do have items that we can start kind of talking about and working towards. So I think initially it would be good to kind of set a regular time to meet, but that's something that we have to look at as to what's going to work best. When they did meet, it was to look at the optimized Main Street grant applications that we did receive and make recommendations for those.
So just so I can put you on here, Mindy, if I put you on placemaking, because you know that from your schedule, there's a couple you can't make, but primarily you can be on that committee based upon the time it's gonna meet.
Yes.
I'll put you on there for right now, and then I guess, when I get more information from the committee on business development, I can let you know.
The only Wednesday I definitely can't is the second Wednesday. So,
Okay,
Wednesdays.
and I think we were doing the first Wednesday, but,
That would look fine, yeah.
okay. All right. So, having made those modifications, is there any report from the outreach committee?
No, we,
Jen and I
actually,
just,
no, we're gonna meet next week, and look at, see who was on the outreach committee before, we talked to them, formally,
Is there a date for the meetings yet?
yeah, next, week from today at 2 p.m. We're gonna
And
be-
essentially, we're gonna basically do some, I think, board subcommittee planning and then start reaching out to volunteers and try to figure out a regular schedule, just kind of get a handle on things.
So next Wednesday at 2 p.m. but where? Sorry.
Blend.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, can I back up one step? You just mentioned the contract discussion. Did we have consensus on, I think I've asked this before, are we looking at a 1 or 2 year length of the contract?
I think that so the executive committee has to discuss, and we're gonna come back to the board and talk, give kind of our recommendations. So it's gonna be a board discussion. I think that's where we were gonna start it.
Going back and forth a couple
Yeah.
times, I know.
Okay, great.
Okay, so business development committee, obviously they haven't met, I don't know when it was that we met the last
A couple
time.
months ago,
Yeah, so,
April maybe.
yeah, so, Tim, are you gonna reach out to people on your committee then and
Yeah.
schedule something?
Yeah.
Do you, I know obviously it's the consensus of the committee, but are you gonna try to do the first Wednesday of the month still at 8, or you don't know for sure
I don't know, but I'll throw that out there and see
if it works? Okay, all right, placemaking committee, Tom.
We met on the 18th, and then one thing to communicate is we decided that we'll meet monthly on the third Tuesday of every month at 8 a.m. And Jim had put very good notes in the minutes from our placement committee. And we'll incorporate this presentation in our next meeting on the 15th.
Were there any action items that you came up with? I don't think there was anything that we had to do at the board level,
Not
correct?
at the board level as well.
Okay,
and where did that meet? Where is it going to meet?
We meet at the old Opera House on the second floor, 350 North Board, above the Aggies.
I don't know, if this is even happening option, but would there be a way that like all these little committee meetings could just always be in one place, like at different times, but like just one, like this is where we have the committee meetings, you know, instead of, because then I feel like it's so confusing, like one's at Glen, one's here, one's over here.
I think it depends on who the chair is, because if the chair is the one that's kind of coordinating the location, I don't know if we can necessarily use the same location.
Okay.
I'm not saying it's not possible, but
I'll change from the hallway to the.
Bench outside.
I'll move that. That'll be our business.
okay, events committee.
And that committee did meet to kind of just do updates on where we were with the individual events. In particular, Porch Fest, which was scheduled for the 23rd, which unfortunately, looking at the weather, there's 80% chance of storms with lightning, hail, and et cetera. So we made the decision to reschedule and essentially bundle it with what was going to be our Harvest Festival downtown, which is also Michigan Downtown Day. So it's kind of a nice day to celebrate for community, but also for businesses as well. And that event was included at having entertainment anyway, so it kind of bundled the two together. September 23rd. Yep. And then, so unfortunately we canceled. Weather turned out to be great that day anyway. So my fiance had to listen to me grumbling all day. But that's okay. Outside of that, we kind of touch base on Winterfest, Treat Walk, the events that we have coming up throughout the fall. But the minutes are in your report.
I'm sorry, but when was this event? Because this is the one that I mentioned,
Second Tuesday of the month.
so I
At
missed
5:30.
it for this.
So second Tuesday at 5:30.
There will be one the second Tuesday of this month then?
Yes.
Okay. And then where is this meeting?
That one meets at Vinyl,
Okay. At what time, sorry?
5:30.
Anything else on committees?
I didn't know you were current, so I'm sorry.
So moving on to Center for the Arts. While we don't have anything under subcommittee for business for today, I believe Jill wasn't able to be here, and I believe Tim is going to be their spokesperson.
Yeah, I have just a quick report. Michigan Fossil Show opened up yesterday at the gallery. It's going to run until September 23rd. It was created by a guy by the name of Paleo Joe. And there's an opening reception on August 4th from 5 to 7 for meet and greet. And then he's going to do a full presentation at the Pix on September 16th at 2:30. You do have to purchase tickets for that event. They're $100. $1. And then the first, $1, and then the first 100 guests receive a free fossil from Paleo Joe. If you want to pay $100, I'm sure
It's really appreciate it,
the gallery classes that they had in July were well. It went okay, but the attendance was lower than they hoped. They're still trying to get back to about 40 students in August. Youth theater program, first youth summer theater show, Rainbow Fish, had a 2-day run with 145 people in attendance. The next one is called Wrinkled in Time, which they're rehearsing now. Will open August 11th at 7:30 and August 12th at 2:30. Summer pick season continued with the movie Forbidden Planet, 34 in attendance. Motown Eagles concert at 149 people in attendance. North by Northwest, the movie had 39. They had a lot of popularity for the Raiders of the Lost Ark. All this, the Pix is able to do this because of the additional money that they got from the city of here this year. In July, there was approximately 850 people visiting the Center for the Arts. Jill met with Jim and Harley Whalen of Candid Priest Productions about a film festival, and I think Jim was involved in that too. He'd probably give you a better rundown than I can. But essentially, these guys want to do a film festival here. because the one in Traverse City's been canceled. I forget his name, backed out, and so they had no funding. The only issues that the center has is that they don't really have any money to put anything on. So I was told, Jill impressed upon these guys that there was no money to contribute from the center and that they had to get it going on their own, so. And if you're interested, Jim knows way more than I do
Yeah,
about
I'm gonna
this, so.
touch base on it too.
So that's the base report.
Okay, thanks, Tim.
Yep.
So the next thing is the Main Street program update, Jim.
So, just kind of real quick to follow up with Tim on the idea of the film festival. Last year, some of you might recall, there was a production company in town that filmed a movie utilizing the historic courthouse called Finding Nicole. Currently, that movie is being shopped around with a couple of different services, including Stars, Sony, and Netflix, are all looking at different to distribute it. But the company behind that is Painted Creek Productions. They're based out of Lake Orion. And for a few years now, they've been talking about the idea of wanting to do a film festival. Now, recently, Traverse City announced that they are no longer going to do the Traverse City Film Festival. So they kind of see this as a good opportunity for them to start moving forward with this. They're looking at May, in particular, May 10th through the 12th of next year. So Harley, who runs the Painted Creek Festival, he, myself, and Jill met a couple weeks ago to kind of discuss schedule, timeline. They are confident that they can bring in sponsorships for the festival itself, but it still needs to be a partnership between the DDA, the CFA, and then of course the production company to really kind of make it successful. Their more short-term goal than long-term goal is to make this a Oscar-nominated film festival, or actually rather an Oscar-qualifying film festival. So what that means is any films shown at this film festival would be eligible for Oscar contention. The only festival currently in the state of Michigan that has this level is Ann Arbor. Traverse City was, but again, we said that one is no longer taking place. For the first year, they're talking about bringing in John Savage, who's been in Carnival, Game of Thrones was one, a bunch of other movies, multiple Oscar award-winning actor already, bringing him in to do a Lifetime Achievement Award presentation. They've got partnerships that they're lining up with Fago, with Better Made Potato Chips, kind of some of the larger Michigan companies that they've worked with through their productions already. So their goal is, their hope is to bring in some of those companies for partnerships and help with the financial area. Where the Pix would be involved would obviously be helping with the production, showing the movies, the sound, the technical side of it. The hope from the DDA is, if you recall from our current contract that we just reviewed, we have 5 uses of that space. Utilizing 3 of the DDA uses for the space to help offset some of their costs. That still gives us a space for a tourism first impression program, for a public meeting if we need it. But this would allow essentially us to kind of come in as a partner as well. And the other DDA involvement is going to be looking at how we tie this into the greater downtown. And that can be in adding levels of our own, whether it's through additional meet and greets, programming, additional screenings, projects, etc. So the hope would be to kind of put together a subcommittee that could kind of focus on this. Harley and Jill are working on scheduling and logistics for the Center for the Arts, but they would love to see the DDA as a partner to bring it and make it more of a community event. If it achieves the level that they're hoping, I think it could be a really big economic boost for the downtown, definitely for hospitality, for restaurants, but also I think for retail as well, because I think there's a lot of merchandising strategy that can take place on top of that. And it could potentially bring in people from not just Michigan, but all over the country.
Are you looking for more than one or just one or two, one or two people from this board to serve on that subcommittee?
I think for the subcommittee, ideally, probably right now, probably 2 or 3. And then just to kind of start the conversation and explore, but then I think there's probably going to be a point where we're going to need more volunteers to help them kind of really grow.
I just had a question about, the ladies night out, because usually they do that Mother's Day ladies night out, would that be then? I'm not a fan of the spring ladies night out anyway, even like from a retail standpoint, it's not as good as the fall one, but like would that be, we would still try to do both, like 2 weeks in a row, or would the ladies night get?
We haven't had that conversation yet.
Okay.
When we do our annual retreat and look at the events for the next year, I think that would be a
Okay.
conversation.
Because even just from having like a little storefront standpoint, it'd be just hard for me 2 weeks in a row to do I just think that's too close together.
Sure.
I think this movie was better, so.
Why didn't Traverse City drop it?
I don't know all the details behind it. The main driver behind that was Michael Moore and his company, and I know they kind of moved on to new endeavors, but I don't know all the details.
Would Michael Moore be involved with this one? Because I don't
No,
No.
Okay.
he's done.
Because we get Jeff the English or something.
Jeff, did you have a question?
Tim Allen.
Yes.
I bet you have a question.
Yeah, Jim, would this be the Painted Creek function? I mean, did they choose when you know that? If it's going to be, the Appear Film Festival or?
So
Or
they're working on a name. What they're talking about, because every film festival has some kind of award. They're talking about doing like a crown essentially for like best film, best actor achievement or whatnot, and tying that into the title. So they're working on it, but essentially it'd be presented by Lapeer Main Street DDA, by Paint Creek Productions, and the Center for the Arts.
And
Well, I just wanted to know, so it sounds awesome. So other than like funding and sponsorships and that kind of thing, are there any identified potential hurdles to making it happen besides the financial?
I think financial is probably the biggest one. We're early on in the conversations, so I don't.
Nothing has been identified that like we need to get past that.
Number
The
2
biggest
is probably
thing,
be volunteers.
Yeah.
Okay.
Volunteers, and a big concern not only of Jill's but mine as well, even when we were having these early conversations, is the PIX has very limited staff. And that's where volunteers are going to be really important. In making sure that the staff is compensated, and make sure the staff has time for breaks. Back in 2010, 2011, there was the Made in Michigan Film Festival that took place at the PIX, and that was one of the big issues. Is that
Not enough.
essentially the staff wasn't even getting time to eat or have bathroom breaks, and
That's not
that
okay.
festival real quick.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think the first thing we need to like indicate, even if it's by consensus, is does the board think that this is a good idea that we partner with CFA to be a part of this film festival next year? I mean, I don't see anybody saying no.
has this company ever done a film festival before? Okay, so this is just like, there's not one, so they're like, hey, we're gonna try this now. Not like they used to do it, now they wanna bring it here.
Yeah, this would be a brand new. They did talk to Oxford as well. Oxford was interested, except they have different circumstances, right? They have a cool small town, but they have a chain cinema is their theater, and it's a whole different atmosphere. And they really like Lapeer. They really had a good experience when they were here filming, and their hope is to do more productions in here.
Jim, do you need something formal from this board or? do you
So the
need
only thing I would
consensus?
need from this board, at least right now, would be agrees to use 3 of our Center for the Arts uses to support this.
Do you need like a motion for that or just a general?
You want
Probably,
to
let's do a motion, yeah.
All right, is there a
I'll make
motion?
that motion that we use up 3 of our days with the center.
Any further discussion?
Historically, what have we used those days for in the past, or is this a new?
And that's the thing, in the past, we've used it for a public presentation, once or twice a year, but we haven't, in the past, we had 3 uses, and we weren't using all 3 uses.
What a great utilization.
So, yeah, this year, we're upped it to 5. I think this is a good option.
And I hope we're not seeing this as a commitment, other than a commitment to
Investing,
explore
yeah.
further.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
I mean, it could get to the point where everybody says this isn't partners.
Yeah,
Yeah, and that could be from any of the partners.
Right.
all right. Any further discussion? Who moved? Who's first?
I s-
I was just gonna say, I have a buddy that's a high school friend that's up in Traverse City. He manages 2 hotels, or he's, that, he was so good, it was like, that was our best week of the summer.
Really?
They sold out, people from all over the country. Of course, Traverse City's a much bigger city, already a destination, but I'm just thinking economic impact. I mean, it could literally appear on the map. I think
We are in the
well,
Technically.
a real-
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Motion carries. And I guess if anybody would like to serve on the subcommittee, obviously there are, so it looks like we already got 4. We have 4. We got Jeff, we got Elizabeth, Megan, and Ashley.
Cool.
Great. All right, we need to move on. Oh,
Just a few more updates, that's okay. So, as you guys recall, we were a recipient of MSU's First Impression Tourism Program. They have been to the community, they have done their visit, kind of their walkthrough, put together their list. So the next step is we will be holding a public presentation of their findings and their recommendations. This is going to be September 19th at the Pix Theater at 5 o'clock, open to the public. The hope is that we fill all 300 seats. Yeah, it's there. I
What's
think
the date again?
September 19th. It's a Tuesday. But this will be, essentially, they'll present their findings, they'll have their recommendations. And this is, they bring in an outside group, they do walkthroughs of their community, take notes, and it's, as if they were kind of like a secret shopper for the downtown. They're going to give us their honest first impression, not only of the downtown area, but of the city as a whole with their recommendations. So I think it could potentially be a really nice thing to get. Have an open mind when you go in, nobody being offended, or, might be really good results too, or a mix of both. But either way, I think it'll be a good thing. So again, that's September 19th.
Do you get a sneak peek ahead of time, or are you gonna be
Yes.
surprised with all of us?
Yeah,
Okay.
so we have a subcommittee that is made up of myself, Robbie Church from the Parks Department, Josh Atwood from the City Commission, and Samantha Dione and Dayton Cortez from Cream.
Okay.
They wanted city, youth, business, and DDA representation for the meeting.
What time was that again?
Be 5 o'clock. And we've received everything we need to move forward with our asset mapping through Michigan Main Street, including the online access for Regrade to start entering information into the system. I know some of you in email said that you'd be willing to help out with that. So I will be following up with you to make sure that you have the app on your phone and kind of run through how to use that. It's really easy. But if we kind of break it up by block, we can go through it pretty quickly. Hopefully this Sunday, the weather right now is looking like it's going to be sunny, which means we'll finally be able to do the social district border on Legacy Street. So if anybody is around Sunday at about 9 o'clock in the morning, and you want to throw some hands on the street, show up. We'll have a Sherwin-Williams shirt for you, and it's glad to help out. I'm also going to be nominating the DDA for Project of the Year for the Michigan Downtown Association for the vibrancy program that we did with the murals, the chess tables, the garbage cans, the social district border, etc. through the NDA. And I'm also going to nominate us for Community of the Year for the NDA also, because why not? It's what we're applying for. So I'll follow up on that. If we're successful, it would be announced at Birmingham's annual conference in November. And then also to that regard, just kind of touting my own horn, I should graduate with a certificate in downtown management from the Michigan Downtown Association as part of their first class.
You said you should, what?
I had to complete a capstone project.
Oh, the magician thing.
Yeah,
right?
and I'm working on putting together a presentation on thinking like a magician for the benefit of the streets.
That's a really unique perspective, I think.
Basically thinking outside the box, but a little bit different spin. All right, that's it.
Is
Any
that it?
questions?
Sorry, it's not really to do with that, but just while we're kind of on the subject of the benches, can we get anything like jotted down that we can talk soon about the benches?
I made a note to discuss the benches at our retreat as possibly a good project.
Okay.
Okay, moving on to new business, the certified local government discussion. Obviously, we have our experts here in case there's any questions for them. Ashley, do you
I have a question, it's actually for Jim, sorry. Do you know if we already have a historic district ordinance on the books, or is that something we would have to?
As far as I know, we do not.
So any of you could have answered that question.
Yeah, no, so that will be, so my hope is we have a discussion and then essentially some time to think about it and kind of process, come back next month and make the decision of, do we want to recommend this to the city to move forward? Because ultimately it's going to have to come from the city as far as putting together the historic ordinance and also the historic district commission. I think there is definitely room for us to assist with that, but it's also going to have to be a city effort, similar to the redevelopment ready community like Alan indicated.
I had a question for Alan. So one of the things we have to do is, I think it was the fifth one, was basically we have program responsibilities ongoing once we become a CLG. What does that entail? I know you said there's like an annual report. Is that it, or what do we have to do with that program?
Yeah, it's basically that you have to keep the ordinance in effect, and you have to keep that historic district commission appointed, since those are the two main criteria to become a CLD. There are some communities that may enact an ordinance that 5-10 years later they decide they want to repeal an ordinance for whatever reason. So when that fifth point said perform responsibilities satisfactorily, it just meant keep your ordinance in effect, keep your historic district commission active, and then complete that annual report for us. And that is essentially what keeps a community in good standing with the program, and it can participate in perpetuity for it. So yeah, that's it. It's pretty simple at the end of the day.
What constitutes active? Is it meeting at least once a year, meeting monthly, quarterly?
Yeah, so the local historic district ordinance and the historic district commission. So there is a state law in Michigan, Public Act 169 of 1970, that provides the parameters for local historic districts and historic district commissions. So state law, it's not SHPO rules, regulations, all that good stuff. So under state law, a historic district commission needs to meet at least 4 times a year, roughly quarterly. Of course, sometimes you don't have business and you don't need to meet, but at least have that public opportunity to meet 4 times a year.
Okay. So that was going to be my other question. So you actually have to, even though you might have this ordinance and not actually do anything with it initially, you still actually have to have not only the commission established in the ordinance, but you actually have to appoint, I would think that probably the city commission would appoint the more members, but you have to have active people in those seats that are meeting, even if you're not doing anything other than just establishing the ordinance.
Correct, yeah, so you have to have that membership appointed to the commission. And so that would be 5 members for the year based on the population size. And those can be, so city residents, obviously. The way that I'll mention this just because some people get tripped up. So the way that the law reads, it reads as though you have to have an architect on the commission, and you have to have at least 1 member recommended by a local historical organization, so somebody that's recommended by the local historical society. The reality is that some communities don't have an architect in them. Some communities don't have an architect in them that is willing to volunteer for a board. Same thing for a local historical society member, etc. You can't force anybody, obviously, to volunteer for this. So what it is you have to show the effort to identify those people should they exist in your community. If not, you move on and appoint anybody else. So I do like to throw that out there because some people, when they get started in this process, they're like, oh my God, well, we just don't have an architect that's willing to serve. Put in your vacancy announcements that you're looking for such people, but again, be confident and move on. That's fine. So appointing them. And that's why I mentioned too that for communities that don't have a local historic district established, because again, not every community is ready to do that. Maybe there's a lot of public relations and all that goes into that process. There are other things that historic district commission commission can do should they decide that they want to, so they can help with other programming, they can do public educational things, they can do training. We can come out and assist them if they want to engage other activities. There's nothing that says that they have to, but they do have that ability to do so. And for a lot of communities, and particularly smaller communities, there's a lot of overlap, amongst the membership of that commission with other entities and historical societies and so on, just by nature of who may be in the community. So sometimes there's kind of these natural threads that get established where there are not these other items to tackle through the actual local district portion of that.
Go ahead, John.
My investment question.
No, go ahead,
Um,
sorry.
If this committee was to establish a historic district and or an ordinance, does that limit, say, a developer or a building owner to facade improvements? Does it take on has to be historic looking or like vintage of the era?
So what a local
I mean, would
historic
it be limiting to?
So a local historic district does invoke design review. And we're talking exterior design review. So that would mean that if there were a local historic district established, that any exterior changes to that property would go for review by that appointed historic district commission. So if they were looking to replace windows, or if they're looking to change transparent glass with tinted glass, all those sorts of things that may impact, that would go for review by the historic district commission. That does not include things like maintenance of a property. There are all those things that need to be done, on a cyclical basis. Those types of things, minor projects, don't have to go for review. It's really those things that has the potential to have a substantial impact. There's a lot of nuance within that process, because communities can also do what we call administrative approval of certain types of projects to let them move easily through the process. So it's not as if every project that has an exterior component suddenly has to go through this larger process. There are ways to kind of work through that if that would be established. But that is essentially what a local district means, is that there is a component of review. And the way that state law is written is binding design review before a building permit would be issued.
So you're saying, if I'm, maybe I'm missing a lot here, but personally, I don't see anything good with this program. Because you're not gonna give grants to private property. So you're saying somebody in the historical district, you're not giving them money or anything, but I wanna change the windows of my building, I gotta get approval?
If a historic district is established, and that's where there's a lot of, the access point for the program.
You answered my question, I'm totally opposed to this.
Who sets the design parameters? Is that set by like a state law or a national regulation, or is that something that the commission itself and the government itself sets up the standards for what those design, parameters are? How does that work?
Yeah, so they use what are called the Secretary of the Interior's standards for rehabilitation. A lot of words, but they're 10 broad and somewhat generic and purposely criteria. So things like, before you look at replacement, consider repair. If it's not feasible to repair, then replace with something that is compatible with the historic character. So these very broad kind of ideas, because these standards, which were developed by the National Park Service, were intended to be applicable to any property anywhere in the country. And so it's just general, here's a thought process essentially of how you work to maintain the character of a place. Communities can establish their own design guidelines if they want to develop more nitty-gritty criteria.
Colors and that kind of
Correct.
stuff? Okay.
It's not required, but a community can do that under state law. And so there are some that say, okay, well, if we're looking at a new construction project, here are the things that we want to look at. If we're looking at a window replacement project, here are the things that we're going to look at. Every community does that differently. It's completely under the purview. The other, main point too is with that ordinance, it's up to the community what or if they designate anything. There's no requirement that you have to designate anything. That's a local decision because they're local resources. It impacts local economics and all that good stuff. So it is up to the local community should they do that. But it does invoke that criteria. And so there are some communities, for example, where the only place that they've ever used that local designation is on a municipally owned building that, you know, is historic and you know, is feasibly going to be protected anyway. So they do that just in the event that, you know, maybe if we decided to sell this in 50 years or whatever. So they never have any private property that is protected. It's just a, you know, a community resource, if you will. That's the way a lot of communities deal with this. But again, it's a local decision. We don't come in and say, hey, you have to start protecting all this, or here's what to protect. Should a community decide to do that, we can help you figure out that process. But you know, it originates at the community level.
So I have a question then. So just to kind of follow what Tim was saying. So if we create this historical district ordinance, first question is there training or education, something from your office that actually helps us figure out how to create a historical ordinance?
Mhm.
So we do that. That implementation of that ordinance does not create any type of review standards at that point. It literally is just something that exists in the ordinance, or then, you know, obviously if we establish the commission, that we have those grant opportunities. That's all that I mean, obviously there's the annual report, but there's no, at that point, it's not like if somebody applies, you know, wants to put windows on their building, if we have nothing designated, they don't have to come to the historic commission to ask for permission to change the windows.
That's
Correct?
correct. That's correct.
Okay.
The establishment of the ordinance gives the community the power to do those things should they exercise to use
Right.
them.
If they want to.
If they want
They
to.
want
But-
Okay,
but the
that I
establish-
didn't
Just
understand
wanted to
that,
make
that's
sure.
good to know.
Yeah, the
Okay.
ordinance in and of itself does not actually establish any local historic districts. It gives the city the power to establish those local districts in the future, should they decide that they want to do so.
And would that be on the historic commission to designate those areas once that's created?
Yeah,
If there were going to be.
Yeah, broadly speaking, there is a process that's outlined under state law that, you know, and it includes public, you know, education and outreach and all those things that are important to that process. But yeah, broadly speaking, there's a, you know, typically a year-long or more process that goes through, you know, before any of that work can happen. And then before anything is established, it is up to council to establish that. That's ultimately where that power lies. So they would vote on whether or not to establish any proposed districts. But again, that's something that can happen later on. Yeah.
So if I could just add real quick, so when the city updated a lot of the guidelines a couple years ago through like the planning commission, they put a lot of things in there to kind of already kind of protect the historic look of downtown. So a lot of that kind of would tie into what this would do. They have a lot of the kind of the work done already for that. The other thing, the benefit would be, well, this particular program doesn't fund or offer grants particularly for private. It does open us up to apply for that Paul Broom
$750,000.
which we can then sub-grant out to private property owners.
Say that again.
So there is a grant through the national parks called the Paul Broom, is it Paul Broom or Broom?
Broom, yeah.
Yeah. It is a grant for communities to apply for up to $750,000 that they can then in turn sub-grant out.
To private.
So, and that can be to private property owners for their building rehab as well. And then I think there's also potential technical support that would be available.
Correct, yeah, so the kind of nuance there is that, you know, as it relates to private properties is, you know, we can provide technical assistance and support and, you know, park services that do your program as well. And then again, those sort of kind of auxiliary items, you know, having architects that can come in and help with, you know, doing construction drawings and construction industry, all of those sorts of things are fair game for that private side. The other thing I would mention too, with the local historic districts specifically, should those ever be created, is it does open up the possibility for property owners to access state historic preservation tax credits. So that is one of the pathways that you can access state preservation tax credits for both residential and commercial properties. is being located within a local historic district. If a property is located within a local historic district, and they're, let's say they're replacing a roof, or, you know, they're doing interior painting, or whatever it may be, they can get a 25% credit on their state, either personal or business income taxes, for being located in one of those districts. So there are some kind of auxiliary things that come along with that. But yeah, you know, I think the important piece behind all of it is that, you know, one does not necessarily lead to the other.
Right.
You know, and again, those would be further conversations that the city would have to make, with public involvement, should they ever actually want to move forward with anything like that.
So
If I can just add to that quickly, Josh Bruce of Michigan Main Street. Everett, Michigan is a CLG, as of 2021. They have a historic district commission, they've got the ordinance, so they are a CLG, they've got access to grant funding, they have no local historic district right now. There is a project that we've been working on that will be roughly a $4 million redevelopment in downtown. 2 storefronts, 8 to 12 apartments, somewhere in there. That project will not cash flow without historic tax credits. So now, because Everett did that work up front, they're working with Allen and Shippo to come out and do a historic survey and get the ball rolling, maybe apply for some CLG funds to then look at implementing a historic district that would then qualify this project for historic tax credits. So I know it's a kind of misconception, and I'm not going to argue that it doesn't happen, where historic district commissions do add, you know, this idea of red tape for redevelopment. But when done correctly, there is no greater asset for historic redevelopment than, you know, all of these grants and all of this infrastructure to ensure that your community's vision is implemented.
Okay, so it's about 9:17 right now. Obviously, there's probably a lot more questions we have for you, and we appreciate all that you provided today in the presentation. Obviously, we have a lot to think about over the next month, but please be ready to kind of bring this to the table as to what we want to recommend, make a decision to recommend to the city commission, you know, our thoughts, because they're going to want to know what we think of this and what we want to do with it. So kind of be ready for that at the August DDA meeting. But we have to move on. So thank you again for being here. We're on to the social district expansion.
So in your packet is an updated or proposed draft for expanding the social district. And what the city manager is looking for today is a recommendation from the DDA to the city commission that covers a few different things. The first would be expanding the social district from its current size, which currently ends at Cedar Street, which is right by Tilted Access. It would expand the district down to Saginaw Street. So down to just where Sherwin-Williams is. It would be on the east side of Saginaw. It would not cross Saginaw Street at this time. The other recommendations they're looking for, other additions to the draft language that they've included, is there's language in there right now on page 6 that says crossing of an open roadway must be within a designated crossing area and only with an empty cup. Don't know why that's in there. It's not in the state law. It's not in the state language. The cup does not have to be empty. You can't drink from the cup in an empty roadway, which is in an open roadway, which is common sense. But so removing that particular line from the rules on page 6, that would be removed so that it's not relevant. The other one is on page 8, and it is the section that says if you're a social district, placing a stickered logo on each cup and also requiring each licensee to also place a sticker on the cup. Just a little redundant, and it doesn't have to be 2 stickers. The language that's in the law just states that the licensed establishment has to have a logo or unique identification on the cup, and there also has to be a logo or unique identification for the commons area on the cup. But that can all be done under one, whether it's a sticker or printed on the cup. So just kind of cleaning that language up so that it matches the state law. And then the final one is on page 9. And there's a section kind of at the end about each permit holder posting a sign identifying themselves as a permit holder.
What paragraph are you in, sorry?
It is page 9.
What's the?
Marketing
is it marketing? No. Additional rules?
So it is under additional rules and regulations.
Okay.
The very last kind of tick or bullet point there. Social district permit holders will be required to post a sign identifying the business as a permit holder, and such signs shall include the basic requirements of the operation of the social district, i.e. no outside alcohol, all alcohol must be in the cup. Also have etiquette and guidelines on there. That is new. They haven't been required in the past to do that. But we are looking at adding that language, one, because it also kind of helps show that business is participating in the social district. It also kind of helps us with the education efforts as well. One thing that I think could be a nice gesture on behalf of the DDA is if the DDA looks at covering the cost for those signs, because they can be done pretty inexpensively, using like materials similar to what we've used for the murals, the J-bond material. It's just the aluminum sheeting, where we can provide those for the establishments to install. If not, it could be as simple as just a printed sheet of paper in a frame, just as long as they have some kind of signage.
So it doesn't have to be standardized necessarily, just as long as it meets the requirements?
I do have a graphic that I started putting together that I sent out to the licensed establishments to kind of chime in on. It kind of outlines some rules and etiquettes, just to get their feedback on what are they noticing, is there anything that I left off. So those would be the recommendations we would be making to the city, to include that language on the signage, to remove and simplify the sticker requirement, and then also to remove the crossing when open roadway. And then extending the district to Second Street.
Is Chief Howell been consulted? He's okay with the extension?
Yep, yeah, before, Mike's been working on it for a little while now, before he even came to us, he already engaged with Chief Howell.
What is the benefit of extending it to Saginaw Street? Because Arcadia doesn't have their liquor licenses, do they, or?
They do not, but it does open up that if they decide to get a license down the road, that they could potentially participate in the social district. It also extends it into pocket parties, or like the concert series, or any events that might extend down that way. One of the issues we have right now is even on like Monday nights, people are getting drinks and they're walking down Epison Street.
They're doing it anyway.
Because the street is closed.
Right.
Yeah, and there's been no incidents in the 3 years we've had the social districts.
And people have been bringing a pharmacist for decades, so I feel like it just needs to calm down.
It also helps bring traffic to the businesses though.
What was that?
It also helps bring traffic to the
Yeah.
businesses,
Oh, okay.
all the way. So, every business owner can.
Well, I was
Maybe benefit, that's the big thing.
So, There is talk about expanding it down the road across Saginaw Street, so
To get to
that Cheers
Cheers.
could benefit as well, but right now, they want to look at making Saginaw Street crossing a little bit more pedestrian friendly, safer, so updating the safety improvements there
I don't have
first.
an issue with it, I just was thinking that there's really nothing down there that it would apply to, no businesses or anything.
Yeah, a couple
And
chicks
just
go
to cut up
shopping.
right
or
in Cheers just
something.
seems like a shame, like it seems pointless, but I mean, if people want to bring their beer down and shop, that would be awesome though, so I don't want to say no.
Yeah, it extends it down the street, and it also opens up for future development opportunities.
Okay.
as well.
I just feel bad for Cheers, I feel like
So
that.
it's kind of essentially being proactive.
So with those revisions that Jim has recommended be made to the city commission, is there a motion to approve?
I have a quick question first. On number 4, you've carved out some exceptions. The pier days, swing out, second weekend of October, I'm not sure what that is. So my question is this: let's say that we do that film festival and we don't want it to happen during the film festival. Can we come back and say, hey, this is an excluded time also, or?
Yeah, so I think it's those specific events like the Pier Days, Swing Out, Nightmare on Epsom Street is the event, it's the second weekend, but it's also at the discretion of the city. So if there are times where we don't think the social district would be a good fit, then it's making that request.
So we need to request that from the city and then.
Yeah.
All right, is there a motion? It's been moved by Jeff, support? Support by Megan. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. Motion carries. Do you need action on the school spirit flags today? I actually have to wait.
The only thing I have for the spirit flags is, we talked a little bit about this at the design or placemaking committee and reaching out to service organizations, essentially to update and place the spirit flags that we had to recognize the schools. They've been around since 2015. They're heavily faded. Some of them are kind of tattered. So reaching out to service organizations to kind of see if they're willing to cover the cost for replacement. I'm happy to go to service organizations and do that. I just think it'd be nice to have that as an official project from the DDA before I go out and ask for money first. So I would basically be looking for approval to move forward to try to fund the replacement of those flags. So we do not have the budget for it in our budget this year. Cost factor on it would be about $3,000. It's not a huge cost. So I think it's something that we could make a pretty solid case to the service organizations to cover.
I support that as a motion if you did.
So support?
I'll support it.
The only other comment I think I had during the meeting is that I'm not sure why we haven't reached out to the school. I mean,
Yeah.
it is for the kids, but I mean, I guess I'm not sure. I'm not saying they're gonna say yes or, they have to say yes, but I think we should reach out to the school to ask them for a donation towards this.
Yeah, in my thought process is service organizations, including with the leader fund.
Right. All right, is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. Motion carries.
All right, thank you, Kathy.
Sorry.
Tim,
Tim, you're in charge now.
Okay,
I
can
love-
I be in charge from
I
here?
love those. Yeah, sure.
Real quick, I did email out the national accreditation information we talked about last month. I sent the entire packet out to you now, so you should have that. Please go through, fill in your scores. The last couple pages do have a spot to put your scores in. They have a spot for notes, comments. Work on that and be prepared to discuss it at our August meeting. And that's it.
I think at that August meeting, we should have a good block of time, I think, to talk about this.
The accreditation score. Oh, this?
I think that could be a lengthy discussion.
And the August meeting will be the 23rd? That's the
Fourth Wednesday of the month.
Yep.
Okay, next item on the agenda is board member comments. Do you have any board member comments? Maybe none correspondence? Let's see if we have any. So, I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
All in favor? Signify by saying
Aye.
We are adjourned.
Thank you. What's that?
You don't need a support to.
Yeah. We're there. Okay, cool. I guess we can start. Awesome.
Oh, join you on Sunday?
Oh, awesome. Sweet.
Yeah.
Sweet. I
About
appreciate it.
nine-ish.
Yep. Yeah.
Right over here.
If you will, they're kind of down here all the time. If you want me to grab these.
I was like, she's.
What's the order actually?
Back to you.
All right.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. The only thing
Air quality, yeah. I had a really bad headache yesterday, kind of I was doing physical audit, so I was in and out of the car, and, I had to close down. Yeah, I got
She called me like 4 or 5 times.
what's going on? And Jimmy's like,
Yeah.
all right, see ya. Bye.
Yeah.